An archive contained 10,000 unreadable tablets. A human looked once and said, "These were our warnings." The great repository stood silent under the 3 moons of Kelvar Prime. Inside its crystalline walls, the accumulated knowledge of 847 civilizations waited in perfect preservation. Some records glowed with bioluminescent script. Others hummed with quantum data streams. A few existed as frozen thought patterns suspended in temporal stasis fields. Daniel Green walked through the main gallery with his mouth slightly open. He had seen pictures during the 6-month journey from Earth, but nothing prepared him for the reality. The ceiling stretched so high above that atmospheric processors created their own weather system. Clouds drifted between the upper storage levels. "Your species' contribution will be cataloged in section 793, Keeper Ziveth said. The Kelvarian archivist moved on 4 segmented legs, her compound eyes reflecting the ambient light in rainbow patterns. "We have allocated sufficient space for your historical records, artistic works, and genetic samples. We've prioritized items from Earth's major civilizations, spanning the last 10,000 years. The translator implant in Daniel's ear rendered her clicking speech into flat, emotionless words, but he detected what might have been approval in her posture. Most species require several centuries to properly organize their contributions. His attention kept drifting to the various displays. He saw musical instruments from species without ears, mathematical proofs expressed in scent, and historical epics carved into the shells of creatures who had died out before humans discovered fire. They passed through the Hall of Lost Voices, where the final transmissions of extinct civilizations played on an endless loop. Daniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the climate controls. 42 species had contributed their last words to the archive before vanishing from the galaxy forever. "We preserve everything," Ziveth said, noticing his expression. "Victory songs and death cries, birth records and extinction logs. All knowledge has value. This section contains our greatest mysteries," Ziveth explained. She led them past sealed chambers marked with warning symbols. "Materials we preserve but cannot fully understand. Languages without keys, technologies without manuals. Art without context." This wasn't on the official tour schedule. All failed completely. Thousands upon thousands of them, each roughly the size of a dinner plate, covered in intricate markings. "The Valeri Archive," Ziveth announced. 10,000 tablets recovered from a dead world in the outer reaches. "We know almost nothing about their creators, except that they went extinct approximately 3,000 years ago. The tablets appeared to be made from some kind of compressed volcanic rock, dark gray with flecks of crystal embedded throughout. The markings looked like they had been carved by something sharp and precise. The patterns suggest language," Ziveth continued. "But they match no known script family in galactic records. Quantum linguistic analysis found no grammatical structure. Neural pattern matching revealed no cognitive framework. Temporal resonance scanning detected no meaning resonance signatures. Also, chemical analysis found trace minerals from 17 different planetary systems embedded in the stone. The Valeri transported these materials across vast distances. They invested enormous resources in creating this archive." Something about the tablets drew his attention. The pattern seemed almost familiar, though he knew that was impossible. He had spent his career studying ancient human languages, not alien scripts from the other side of the galaxy. He reached out slowly, not quite touching the surface. The carvings formed complex geometric shapes that interlocked and overlapped. Some areas were deeply cut, others barely scratched the surface. Different tools, maybe, or different purposes. "The prevailing theory is that they are warnings," Ziveth said. "Several symbols appear in contexts that suggest danger or urgency. But without translation, we cannot know for certain what they warned about, or why they considered it important enough to preserve in stone." The light caught the crystal flecks, making parts of the pattern shimmer. Wait, the crystals weren't randomly distributed. They formed their own pattern separate from the carved symbols. "Has anyone mapped the crystal placement?" he asked. "Of course," Ziveth replied. No meaningful pattern emerged. They appear to be natural impurities in the stone. "You think the crystals are part of the message?" "All of them, if possible. But they were looking for language. I think these might be something else entirely. Keeper Ziveth had granted him limited access, though her skepticism remained clear. A methane-breathing scholar named Korath observed from a sealed chamber adjacent to the room, his tank filled with yellow-green gas. The tablet measures 32 centimeters in diameter, Korath's translator announced. Composition is compressed basalt with embedded quartz crystals. Age is confirmed at 3,107 years, plus or minus 50 years. A magnifying glass, a set of colored pencils, plain white paper. You understand this is not typical archaeological methodology, Ziveth observed from the doorway. Sometimes the old ways work best, Daniel replied. He began sketching the patterns on the tablet, not worrying about perfect accuracy. He wanted to understand the flow, the intention behind the marks. The symbols didn't form neat rows like human writing. They spiraled outward from a central point, creating layers that overlapped and intersected. Some symbols were large and bold, others tiny and delicate. The deeper cuts seemed to emphasize certain areas while shallow scratches connected different sections. What if this isn't meant to be read at all? Daniel said after an hour of silent work. Not in the traditional sense. See how these symbols are carved much deeper than the others. They draw your eye first, but if you only look at the deep marks, you miss half the information. They don't form words or sentences. They form paths, connections between the deeper symbols. But more than that, Daniel grabbed his sketch and flipped it over, drawing quickly. Ancient human civilizations did something similar. Mesopotamian clay tablets mixed pictographs with geographic markers. Aztec codices combined historical events with star charts. Aboriginal Australians encoded survival information into songs that described landscape features. And these shallow connecting lines could be distances or trajectories. I assume they faced similar problems. When you need to preserve information that absolutely must survive, you don't rely on language alone. Language changes, it evolves, it dies with cultures, but some things stay constant. Physics, chemistry, Daniel pointed to the embedded crystals. These quartz inclusions aren't random. They're placed deliberately at specific points in the pattern. Quartz has piezoelectric properties. Different minerals would refract light differently, conduct energy differently. The physical composition, the carved pattern, the crystal placement, all working together to encode information that transcends language. If those deep symbols really are stars, we should be able to match them to actual celestial bodies. We do not know their homeworld. Korath provided chemical analysis of different crystal types embedded in the stone. Ziveth, despite her initial skepticism, began pulling archived data about the outer reaches. The breakthrough came just before midnight station time. There, Lisa said, her voice sharp with excitement. 3 stars in a tight cluster. The positions match 3 of your deep-carved symbols exactly. Accounting for 3,000 years of stellar drift, the alignment is nearly perfect. What kind of stars? The models show high probability within the next 200 years, plus or minus 75 years depending on mass loss rates. 6 archive collective member colonies. We need more tablets, he said quietly. If I'm right, each one represents a different region of space. Together they form a complete map. Events that repeat on cosmic timescales. Daniel touched the tablet gently, reverently. The Velari didn't create an archive of their culture. They created a survival guide for whoever came after them. 10,000 warnings. We have 3,000 years of information to decode, and we might not have much time. She found Daniel in the vault, surrounded by tablets arranged in a pattern across the floor that made sense only to him. You look terrible, she said by way of greeting. Daniel glanced up from his notes. His hair stuck out at odd angles and dark circles shadowed his eyes. I've been sleeping 4 hours a night. There's too much to process. Red markers dotted various regions. Each red marker represents a tablet we've partially decoded. The Velari weren't just mapping stars. They were documenting cosmic events that follow predictable cycles. Daniel zoomed in on one cluster. This region experienced a gamma ray burst approximately 4,000 years ago. The tablet describing it shows symbols for intense radiation and planetary sterilization. How accurate are these predictions? 2 were close but not perfect, probably because we haven't fully decoded the tablets yet. Rithik's feathers were brilliant blue and gold, and his eyes held the sharp intelligence common to his species. "Dr. Green," Rithik said, his beak clicking between words, "the Council has reviewed your preliminary findings. They are skeptical that a species barely capable of interstellar travel could succeed where our greatest minds failed. They searched for grammar, syntax, linguistic structure. The Velari weren't writing. They were engineering information to survive the death of language itself." "Then let me prove it." Daniel pulled up a different section of the star map. "This tablet describes an anomaly in the Kesper system. According to the Velari warning, there should be gravitational distortions near the fourth planet, strong enough to tear apart ships that pass too close. They lost 3 colony ships there about 800 years ago. Navigation failure, they thought. Coincidence? The Marath Nebula is a designated no-fly zone. 7 expeditions entered over the past 1,500 years. None returned. But for the rest of the galaxy, they vanished instantly. The Velari knew. They tried to warn us." "How many warnings have you decoded?" he asked finally. "Fully decoded, 47. Partially decoded, maybe 300. The rest are still waiting." Daniel gestured to the thousands of tablets lining the walls. "Every one represents a danger zone somewhere in the galaxy. Supernovas, black hole formations, dark matter concentrations, quantum anomalies. The Velari experienced these events over thousands of years and mapped them all. The pattern is clear. These events follow cosmic cycles measured in thousands or tens of thousands of years. To the Velari, they must have seemed random, but with enough time and observation, they found the patterns. Your initial report claimed an imminent threat. When it does, the radiation wave will sterilize everything within 40 light-years. That includes 6 archive collective colonies and 14 inhabited systems. For evacuation purposes, it might as well be tomorrow, Helen countered. Moving billions of people and their infrastructure takes decades, centuries if you want to do it properly. They want a full presentation in 3 hours. They'd mined 17 different planetary systems for specific minerals to embed in the stone. They'd encoded their knowledge in a format designed to outlast their language, their culture, their very existence. And they'd failed. They'd died anyway, probably ignoring their own warnings, and their archive had sat sealed and useless for 3 millennia. "What happened to them?" Daniel asked Zyvith. "The Velari, how did they die?" "The world where we found these tablets showed no signs of war, plague, or natural disaster. The population simply disappeared over a span of approximately 50 years. One generation declined, the next never materialized." He looked at the tablet showing the Orpheus sector warnings. They knew something was coming. They created all this to help others survive, but they couldn't save themselves. "The Council will hear you." The chamber floor held representatives who breathed standard oxygen-nitrogen mixtures. Daniel stood at the center, feeling very small and very human. 200 beings watched him, some with eyes, some with sensory organs he couldn't name. The holographic display behind him showed the complete Velari warning system as far as his team had decoded it. 3,000 years ago, the Velari civilization faced extinction, Daniel began. His voice was amplified through the chamber's translation systems, rendered into 43 different languages simultaneously. "We don't know exactly what killed them, but we know they saw it coming. And in their final generations, they created this. They embedded their knowledge in a format designed to survive the death of language itself." The translator rendered it as, "Why should we trust the interpretations of a species that achieved space flight only decades ago? Every warning we've decoded corresponds to a verified astronomical event. Gamma-ray bursts, gravitational anomalies, spatial distortions. 17 civilizations in this chamber have lost ships or colonies in regions the Velari marked as dangerous. All predicted by these tablets with precise astronomical coordinates. The Velari observed cosmic cycles that span thousands of years. They documented everything they learned. The question is whether we act on the Orpheus sector warning. The radiation wave will sterilize 40 light-years of space. 6 archive collective colonies fall within that radius. 14 inhabited systems. Estimated population at risk is 63 billion sentient beings. A representative from one of the threatened colonies, a methane breather named Korvax, spoke from his sealed tank. 200 years is multiple generations for most species. How can we justify massive evacuation based on predictions from a dead civilization? Modern stellar analysis can measure mass loss rates, fusion dynamics, gravitational stresses. We can confirm whether the supernova timeline is accurate. 200 years sounds like a long time, but moving 63 billion people is an unprecedented logistical challenge. We found personal records embedded in some tablets. The Velari didn't just document cosmic events, they documented their own decline. Their sun showed signs of instability. The data suggests they had approximately 300 years to prepare. They argued over the cost of evacuation versus the uncertainty of predictions. They formed committees and conducted studies. And while they planned and discussed, their population began to decline. Daniel felt the weight of the words. By the time they accepted the threat was real, they'd lost the infrastructure and population base needed for large-scale evacuation. And in their final years, they created this archive hoping whoever came next would be smarter. A council elder, a being so ancient her species' name was forgotten, spoke for the first time in the session. Her voice came as pure thought, translated by quantum resonance. We have been given a gift, the accumulated wisdom of a civilization that learned through failure. To ignore it would be the height of arrogance. The mathematics seems clear, and full council authorization for Dr. Green's team to continue decoding the remaining tablets. They gave us time they didn't have because they wasted it. We can honor their sacrifice by not repeating their mistakes. Debates raged in languages Daniel couldn't begin to understand, but slowly consensus emerged. The measure passed with 78% approval. Survey probes would launch within the month. Evacuation planning would begin immediately. And Daniel's team would receive full access and unlimited resources to decode the remaining 9,500 tablets. As the chamber emptied, Daniel remained standing at the center, looking at the holographic stars rotating around him. Somewhere in that display was the complete map of dangers the Velari had died creating. "They're finally being heard," Zyveth said, approaching silently on her segmented legs. 3,000 years late, but heard. The survey probes returned data that confirmed Daniel's worst fears and greatest hopes simultaneously. The Orpheus sector stars showed every sign of imminent supernova. The Velari had been right, but their warning had given the galaxy time to prepare. Daniel stood in the vault again, but it looked different now. The tablets were no longer arranged on shelves. Instead, they hung suspended in a three-dimensional grid that matched their decoded positions in galactic space. Holographic labels floated beside each one, showing translation progress and threat assessments. Helen worked at a nearby station, comparing spectroscopic data with mineral compositions in the tablets. This one predicted a black hole formation in the Tertian reach. The physics check out perfectly. We should have mining operations evacuate that sector within the next 50 years. Evacuation planning had become a full-time operation employing thousands of specialists across dozens of worlds. Keeper Zyveth entered carrying a case containing 3 new tablets. These arrived from Deep Storage Facility 9. They were classified separately because of unusual markings. "I think these are personal messages." They knew their warnings had come too late for themselves, but they kept working anyway. The Council has officially requested humanity join the Permanent Archive collective staff. They're also proposing a new position, Director of Non-Linguistic Translation Studies. 9,216 were now partially decoded. Another 600 were fully translated. The remaining 200 required specialized analysis still in progress. Each one represented knowledge preserved across millennia. Each one proved that caring about the future was never wasted effort. "I accept," he said. "On one condition, we apply this methodology to every unreadable archive in the collection." There are 13 such archives. Some have defied translation attempts for longer than the Velari tablets. Everyone assumed they were decorative because they don't contain linguistic structures. But what if they're similar to the Velari system? Information encoded in physical properties rather than language. Your species still remembers what it means to fight for survival. The first evacuation transports launched this morning. 3 million people from the outer colonies in the Orpheus sector. They'll be relocated to safe zones over the next 18 months. The Villari gave us time. Green, the Council has established the Villari warning system as a permanent galactic infrastructure. All spacefaring civilizations will have access to the decoded information. The Villari didn't create this for one species or one civilization. They created it for everyone. This was found in a sealed container beneath the vault floor. Our engineers only discovered it during expansion construction. At the center, a single symbol dominated the surface. It took him several minutes to understand what he was seeing. "It's a key," he whispered. "A guide to understanding all the others." They put it last, at the bottom, so whoever found it would have already proven they could think beyond conventional language. "It says we are not the first to walk these stars, and we will not be the last. It says knowledge is the only thing that survives when civilizations fall. And it says that caring for those who come after us is the highest calling any species can achieve." But they succeeded in the thing that mattered most. They reached across time itself to save lives. All the knowledge waiting to be understood. The galaxy was full of voices, some silent for millennia, all waiting for someone who knew how to listen. "We'll hear them all eventually," he said. "Every warning, every lesson. Every hope preserved for the future." The Villari had spoken, and finally, at long last, the galaxy had learned to listen.